Hello and welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Giraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And we are back on to look over the quarterback start sits for this week. Looking forward to getting into these players for you guys. Obviously, changed the format a couple weeks ago, but we're going to look at the quarterback ones. So we're going to do a start and a sit for each of us at quarterback one and at quarterback two, and then we'll go over to sleepers and busts at the end. So getting into the first quarterback start here, you have Brock Purdy.
Yeah, so that game I was really excited about, right? Super Bowl rematch, all the stars were aligning, and then it ended up just being an awful game all around, both from a football perspective and injury perspective. It was just ugly and gross, and Purdy was no exception. He threw 3 interceptions. His week was salvaged by scoring 2 touchdowns on the ground, which isn't
I was going to say he was great. He did awesome, dude. I looked at my fantasy points and I had 17, dude. I don't care anything else about that.
It's funny because I was thinking about making a trade for him, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to buy low." And then I saw his points, and I was like, "God, like, are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
So
yeah, no,
I don't think
I had a buddy text me, "Oh, I should have played Darnold over Purdy." You know, when Purdy was down at like 2 points and he scores 2 rushing touchdowns and actually outscored Darnold.
Yeah. So again, we're not going to see that again. You know, this year, I would imagine, and I can understand the temptation to sit Brock Purdy after that game. Obviously, he lost Ayuk for the season, but he should have Debo and Jennings back for this one. I think we're going to see Ricky Pearsall's role increase as well. Niners are 3-4, and they definitely need to get a win in this one. They've got the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. Cowboys defense is not good. And while I think this will be a big game for Jordan Mason, I think that Shanahan wants Brock to get back on track. He also wants to prove that he's always the smartest guy in the room. Hey, we lost Ayuk. It's next man up. He's going to let him throw for a little bit. I would expect the Niners to handle the Cowboys pretty well in this one.
Yeah, I think Purdy can have a solid game. I do hope that the Cowboys win, kind of. Is that bad? I never root for the Cowboys. I just hope that they beat the 49ers. It would be more entertaining, I think, over the rest of the year to watch the 49ers try and claw out of a 3-5 hole. Maybe the Cowboys cool off some of the heat. They're coming out of their bye week. They just got crushed going into it. I think there's maybe a little bit more stars aligning on Dallas's side to try and take this matchup.
We'll see.
Yeah. So my start of the week here at quarterback, this one is pretty obvious. I mean, but it's Joe Burrow. I think he's coming off a bad game himself at Cleveland. He only had 181 yards. I know he threw 2 touchdowns and turnovers. So like that part was good. But I think overall there might be at least a little bit of reservation when you see 14 points going into a game against Philly, who just gave up like nothing to Daniel Jones. I mean, I think he had like 5 points. They only scored 3 points on offense. The Philly offense looked much better this week. Saquon ran all over them. So, it seems like a little bit like, okay, Philly's starting to play better. Burrow just coming off a bad game. Maybe we don't start him. But I think I'm going to put him right back in my top 5 quarterbacks this week. I would start him with confidence. In your Superflex leagues, this is obvious, but it's just like a confidence thing. In your 1 quarterback leagues, go ahead and go back to Burrow, full confidence this week up against a Philly secondary that I still think is getting better, but not quite there yet, despite what we saw against Daniel Jones last week.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think Daniel Jones not having his superstar left tackle made a really big difference in this game. And Joe Burrow's been playing really clean football. He's only thrown 2 picks on the season to his 14 touchdowns. And one of the things I've noticed with Burrow and Cincinnati is they always seem to play to the level of their competition. They play down a little bit. They get up for these big games. So I think in this one, assuming Philly's able to move the ball successfully against them, I think Burrow's such a gamer, and with Higgins and Chase, obviously, that we could see a pretty decently high scoring affair here.
Your QB1 sit for this week shouldn't be a surprise because you just said how much you like Brock Purdy, is in that same game, Dak Prescott.
Yeah, it might be cheating a little bit to call Dak a QB1 since he is QB20 on the season, but that is kind of on the back of that 3-point fantasy performance he put up and then had a bye week, obviously, last week. He goes on the road to face a tough Niners this week, and Dak Prescott has beaten the Niners twice in his career. That was 2016 and 2017. He's lost his last 3 starts against them. Dallas doesn't have that much going on the ground. Obviously, we know we're trying to get Rico Dowdle going a little bit, but I think with the 49ers, they're definitely going to game plan for CeeDee Lamb. So I don't know. I'm just kind of picturing one of these games where I do think CD will have a good game, but I'm thinking like 8 for 90. Maybe he gets in the end zone. Maybe the other guys don't really get going a little bit. So sitting Dak in one QB.
Yeah, and my QB1 sit is CJ Stroud. So I think that this is at least a little bit of a surprise because they're going up against the Colts. That is an awesome matchup. They really could just like kind of torch them. They could use this game to try and get themselves back on track from a passing game's perspective, get CJ Stroud going. But I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen. Like he has been pretty bad, just in general over the last 3 weeks. I know he had 18 points in week 6 against New England because he threw 3 touchdowns, but the yardage was still below 200 yards, and then 86 and no scores last week, only 5 points. And so like, I think even against Indy, right, it's a division rival, so it should be a more difficult game than just, one of these bad defenses. And on top of that, Indy is like winning games. Like, I don't know that, like, I don't necessarily understand how, but they are continuing to win. So, maybe they let Stroud air it out a little bit, but I almost expect this to be more of a Joe Mixon game. Control the clock, load him up with a ton of work. Maybe he gets in with the passing score, lift up Stroud a little bit, but I could see, 25 touches for Mixon in a way that kind of limits CJ Stroud from having to throw a ton. And they are able to control the clock, they control the game, and they end up just kind of winning in a 24 to 13 type fashion against the Colts here. So he is my sit this week. In one quarterback leagues, I would legitimately look to try and sit him, right? I mean, if you could find a Caleb Williams, a Drake Maye, I would probably go in that direction over Stroud this week. But that's maybe just me. So in Superflex, like the chances you're able to get away from him are just very, very low. So this is, again, a QB1 perspective.
Yeah, when you first texted me that this was one of your sits and I looked at the schedule, I was like, Indianapolis, like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But I think you made a really good point about Joe Mixon, right? Like they are going to want to pound Mixon. He's obviously running effectively in that system. I do think that they will and should make a point to get Tank Dell going. I mean, no catches last week in that loss is just kind of inexcusable. I don't know if that injury from last year is lingering maybe more than we expected, or if they're just not on the same page right now. Maybe there's something off with Stroud, but I do think that they need to get him going. But on that same accord, like if he throws one touchdown through the air, they score a couple on the ground, or they kick a few field goals with him not rushing, like there's just not a lot of upside unless they just say, hey, air it out. And maybe Richardson actually has a good game in this one and they have to play catch up, but I'm not banking on
that.
Yeah,
and Houston's defense is great, right? That's why I was saying like 24 points if Mixon gets in twice, or even once and they kick 3 field goals and Stroud's line ends up being 200 with a touchdown and a pick. Like I don't know. That's not very inspiring to me. So, and obviously a big part of this is Nico's hurt, right? I mean, that's their downfield threat. That's their big number 1 receiver. And so like them trying to figure out and deal with that in real time has been tangibly noticeable within their game plans and stuff. So again, not necessarily the player, but the situation and how I think it's going to play out is why I listed him there. Going down to the QB2s, so we have your first start is Aaron Rodgers. So I'm looking forward to hearing this one.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming off a pretty disappointing loss to the Steelers where he threw 2 picks. One of them was obviously Garrett Wilson's fault. But he gets another week of practice with Davante Adams, who was quiet in this last game. And this is a must-win game for the Jets. They're 2-5 right now. They just made that big trade for Adams. Like, they're all in this season. Like, it is go time. And luckily for Rodgers, he gets the Patriots this week, who are obviously not good. Pats just let the Jags kind of beat up on them, mostly on the ground on the back of Tank Bigsby. And while I think that the Jets will definitely hammer Breece Hall and Braylon Allen in this game, I think that Rodgers is going to make a point to get Adams as well as Garrett Wilson is involved as possible, get on the same page with them, really look to make a statement here. And even if the play call is a run, like Rodgers is going to go up to the line of scrimmage and he's going to call whatever he wants to. So I would expect 2 to 3 touchdowns from him in this one. I really like Rodgers this week. He's someone I'd be trying to jam into my lineups, even in one QB, like if I was still holding on to like Patrick Mahomes or something like that.
Yeah, and I think this is a good take here. I think Adams another week of being able to prepare here, right? He kind of was on a short week, showed up there. I know, like at the beginning, right? But it's weird when it's like your first week. Sometimes guys don't even play. Like we saw
Yeah.
Amari Cooper barely play any snaps, but Adams was out there a ton. I do think another week of preparation going up against New England, a team that's very gettable in the air. I know Christian Gonzalez is pretty good, so maybe Adams doesn't have his best game quite yet. But, Garrett Wilson being able to avoid Christian Gonzalez, maybe he goes nuts in this game. Brees Hall obviously looks great. So I think this is a good call here for Aaron Rodgers
Yeah,
in their statement game, maybe turn their season around.
Ask Brian Thomas Jr. about Christian Gonzalez. Maybe he can give those guys a couple tips.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they'll watch his tape, figure out once somebody breaks it down, there's
just
a way
learn
for
how
them
to
study. Yeah,
learn how to run a 4.33 and
and be 6'3", 210. Yeah, just blow by him,
Unbelievable.
But yeah, so all right, so my QB2 start for this week is Bo Nix. I'm very high on Bo Nix this week, going up against the Carolina Panthers. I feel like just everybody's able to torch the Panthers through the air, on the ground. Doesn't matter. Bo Nix in his last two games as well has had 61 and 75 rushing yards. I really do think that this is going to be a big rushing performance from him against Carolina this week. Obviously, Javonte is a great play as well, but I think that just elevates Bo Nix's floor a lot. And I do think that he's going to be able to throw multiple scores in this game too. He's only done that a couple times this year, but I think this is going to be another time where they're able to just kind of control the game, control the clock. The defense isn't going to give up anything to Carolina, and Bo Nix should be having another 20-point plus game in this one. And I told you, I think I was saying that he's maybe more of a start than a sleeper this week, because I'm going to rank him in the top 10. I really think that he's going to have a monster game in this one.
Yeah, I'm envisioning a similar game script to what they had against the Saints last week. And you're right, Bo Nix is like quietly QB13 on the season without, being a good passer. So I can't really argue with this one at all, as much as I dislike Bo Nix. And I think the advantage in this game is, maybe he gets Cortland Sutton going a little bit more. He's not going to have to deal with Marshawn Lattimore like he did in the game against the Saints. And he can't be any worse as a passer, right? It's Carolina. They're going to want to get him worked in. It seems like they're using Troy Franklin a little bit more. Mims was on the field a little bit more. So I think this is the game that if he does springboard rest of season and improve as like a real life quarterback, this will be the spot to do it.
So your QB2 sit this week is Justin Herbert.
Herbert, man, he's QB 25 on the year. He hasn't had any complete bust games, but his highest point total on the season was Monday night against the Cardinals in kind of a back and forth game in which they ended up losing. And that was only 14.7 fantasy points. He gets the Saints this week, which is a good matchup for the Chargers.
In a game
overall.
He didn't score. His highest point total is in a game that he did not have a score. He did not throw for a touchdown. He did not rush for a touchdown. I think that kind of says it all about how his season has gone so far from a fantasy perspective.
And it's like, as a Chargers fan, obviously that loss was tough, right, against Arizona, but they're just playing kind of like boring football, which is fine because they played exciting bad football the last few years. But I think against the Saints, they're very worn down. They're broken down. I think this is just going to be a big ground and pound game from the Bolts.
Yeah, and that I think is the highlight here, right? I mean, the Saints are turning into the free square in terms of running the ball against them.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 2 weeks, they have just gotten absolutely torched by the Bucks and then by Javonte Williams. So it's just, to the moon for J.K. Dobbins again. I know he had a disappointing week last week, but I think against the Saints, he could just dominate here. And maybe we see a little bit more Vidal as well, just trying to get additional carries going because they're going to be able to be so efficient on the ground. So I can get behind this Herbert take because, again, it's one that maybe only attempts 20 passes. They're going to be crushing them because the Saints have nothing if Carr doesn't play. Now, if Carr plays, maybe they have to throw the ball a little bit more, and then this take maybe softens a little bit. But overall, I'm on board with sitting Herbert everywhere, even in Superflex. My sit of the week for QB2s is not going to be a popular pick, unfortunately, but it's Drake Maye. It's somebody that we've been very excited about, somebody who has played very well over his first two games, 19 and 20 points, somebody that if you got him in a Superflex league, you're starting to look like, wait a second, I feel like I could just plug him in over my struggling QB2 that I've had been dealing with all year. But This week he gets the Jets. So I know the Jets just got torched by Russell Wilson, but I do think that there are levels to this, right? Russell Wilson's first game, he had a good game plan down the field. He's a pretty established quarterback in the league. This week it's going to be a rookie going up against a very good back end of the defense for the Jets. And I know the Jets are pretty banged up in the second level, but overall, I just think that Maye is going to struggle a little bit more than he did against Houston and Jacksonville. So I think overall, Maye this week is in for a little bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, I agree with this take, and that kind of piggybacks off what I was saying with Rodgers. This being a must-win game for the Jets, I think they take care of the Patriots in this one.
All right, moving on to our sleepers. So your first sleeper here is Jameis Winston.
Jameis Winston, man.
Hopefully Cleveland actually makes the start.
Yeah, Cleveland's 1-6. They gave up Amari Cooper. Their season is over. Like, let's just have Winston have some fun, right? Like, they obviously lost Watson for the season. DTR, he got injured in that game as well. And Winston came in with 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, threw for 67 yards and a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. I don't even know what he finished as like the fantasy QB on the week, but it was like, I think he racked up like 9 points off of that one drive or something. So,
touchdown and a 2-point conversion. That's it right there. You got 6 on those 2 plays.
Yeah. And, with Jameis, like, we know he's going to be aggressive. We know he's got a live arm. And this isn't all just like a garbage time take. I think against the Ravens, right? Like, you cannot run effectively against the Ravens, but you can pass against the Ravens. Like, we saw Baker on Monday night carve him up. We know Jameis is aggressive, similar to how Baker is. Like, I think the Ravens have given up like the most yards through the air in the NFL. So I don't know. Let's just let them have some fun. Let's throw it around the yard. And in Superflex, like, if you're in a pinch or you got a bad matchup and you want some upside, like, Winston, baby.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. He loves to sling it. So if you can, we've been calling out to stash him all year. So hopefully he's already on your guys' rosters if you've been listening to us. And that would help in your Superflex leagues for sure. But yeah, I really hope for all the weapons, right? Njoku, Cedric Tillman, Judy, like, I really think those guys could benefit from having Winston under center, even if Winston does turn it over a couple times, but you just know he's going to be throwing it. So I like that call. Before we get into the next guy, just a quick side note here. If you're listening, you probably already see it if you're listening to this a day later, but Alvin Kamara just signed a 2-year, $24 million extension with the Saints, so he will not be traded at the deadline this year. I'm sure that was part of reworking his contract because he's owed like $29 million next year. So, they figured out how to spread that out over 2 years, and he will be staying as a Saint. So my sleeper this week, going back to the quarterbacks, is Russell Wilson. I don't know that this counts, right? I mean, Fields has been good. Wilson was just awesome, right? I mean, he had 25 points. So is he really a sleeper, or is it just like you had him, maybe you were benching him? Maybe he didn't even get added in your Superflex leagues. If you have a shallow Superflex league, somebody thought Justin Fields, or the consensus in your league was Justin Fields was going to kind of take the job back. I don't think that's the case anymore. So I wanted to include Russ here, though, as a sleeper, just because I do think against the Giants, go before their bye week, that he has quite a bit of upside here to really dominate. I mean, Fields just had a great game. I know Fields had a rushing touchdown. That's something that Wilson doesn't excel at, even though he had one last week. But I think overall, they're going to continue to try and take deep shots. They're going to continue to try and develop the offense with Russ this week, regardless of what the score is. So I do think another 20-point game could be coming here. I'm probably going to have Wilson around 15 in my rankings. That's also why I feel like I maybe, it's a little bit cheating to call him a sleeper at that spot. But overall, if you're hesitating or wondering at all if you should be playing Russ, the answer is yes, he should be in your lineups.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with Russ's performance. And as someone who's been extremely frustrated with George Pickens on the season, I am ecstatic that he has Russ, because he just loves to throw the deep ball. We know George Pickens loves to play backyard football. Yes, he'd made some kind of bonehead errors earlier on the season, kind of was getting benched here and there. But I think that Pickens now is probably like, okay, like, I can be a bona fide number one with this guy that wants to throw it deep. Like, let's get this going. So, it'll be interesting to see if, now that they have the tape from last week's game, if they can game plan a little bit more for Russ. Obviously, there's a lot of historical tape on Russ, but it'll be interesting to see if he can, keep it up, because throughout his career, Russ loves nothing more than like a big comeback. He loves the moment. He loves to believe. Like that was kind of that week's game. Like, so we'll see. But I like him a lot, man. And I'm bummed I didn't pick him up in our Superflex league. And now he's locked in the other guy's starter.
Yep. Yeah. And so, like, I mean, obviously, we kind of saw it coming from weeks away. We started talking about it maybe in week 4 that, like, they weren't committing to Justin Fields. And we kept saying, like, if he wins, they're not going to bench him. If he wins, they're not going to bench him. And I think with Tomlin, maybe we shouldn't have been saying that. Maybe we should have just, told everybody to get Russ everywhere. So, and I know in my 12-team league, he was owned since the draft. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to swoop him there either. But yeah, so I like Russ this week. I like Russ rest of the season. I know he's going to be on bye next week, but overall, if you have him, you're feeling pretty good about your quarterback situation now moving forward. Moving over to busts. Your bust of the week is somebody I feel like we just continue to harp on as a bust every single week is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, we keep saying sit Mahomes and now saying he's going to be a bust. And again, he's been that model of consistency in a bad way. Still scored between 12 and 16 fantasy points each and every week. They're undefeated. The defense is great. They're prioritizing the run. He's obviously the cream of the crop in terms of real life quarterback, even though he's having a bad year. Like he's turning the ball over at a higher rate. Like yada, yada, yada. But when the game's on the line, like there's no one I want more than Patrick Mahomes. But in fantasy right now, it's just like, even in Superflex, like you're kind of at the point where if you picked up like a Sam Darnold late, or if you had just gotten Russ off the wire, I think those are much better starts than Mahomes at this point. And he's got a cupcake matchup against the Raiders. The Raiders are not going to be able to run the ball against the top-ranked Chiefs defense. They're going to game plan for Brock Bowers. They're going to have Trent McDuffie shadow Jacoby Myers. So I think, the running backs are going to get 35 carries for the Chiefs and so on. And I don't think that they're going to have Mahomes do anything because, why? Why will they?
Yeah, why would they when they can just run Kareem Hunt up the middle for 120 yards on 50 carries,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's going to be should be a pretty easy matchup. Their defense isn't going to give up anything to the Raiders here. So, Mahomes, it's interesting. I kind of am starting to feel like they're winning in spite of him. He's been bad. The weapons are bad. They're in a bad spot. They lost Juju, who's already been ruled out for this week. He was like limited all week 7, barely got on the field and played, and then it was out immediately ruled out for week 8. I don't know what they're doing with their weapons. I mean, they can crow all they want about they have all the weapons they need in house. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Not yet.
It's running 13 personnel. Like, come on.
Yeah, it's just like
make a trade.
Noah Gray leading the team in receiving. It's just like, okay, you guys need to make a move. Okay, you guys should have got Amari Cooper before the Bills did. But now that you missed on that, can we get like a Deontay Johnson? Can we get a Christian Kirk, right? Somebody to take that Rashee Rice or Juju role, right? Like get somebody in that's actually good receiver to play that role for you guys, and get it established. And this is like why I hate just sitting here refreshing your phone waiting for the trade news, because it's like, this is so obvious they need to make a move. Why hasn't it happened yet? Like, we're sitting here Tuesday afternoon and it just feels like now it's not even going to happen for week 8 either. And I get they're 6-0, so they don't have urgency. They're going to make the playoffs, they're going to win the division, all that stuff. But I don't know. They're going to win this game too, regardless of who they bring in. It's more of getting them up to speed when they need them, right? They're getting Tampa Bay, Denver, Buffalo, their next 3 games after this. Like, bring them in now, get them up to speed, play them in 40% of the snaps or whatever, get them ready for that game against Tampa Bay. But I'm not the GM, so I don't get to make that decision for them.
And one thing to add, I feel like the last 2 years around this time of year, we've been like, what's wrong with the Chiefs? They're more gettable than ever. And then they win the Super Bowl. So I'm not going to say anything negative about their chances of winning the Super Bowl ever again.
Yeah, I mean, they're still the favorites to win, regardless of what we think about their receiver room. And Juju will be back too, right? Like, that's the other thing, is it's not like they're hurting so bad that he won't be back. But I don't know. I'm just frustrated with the fact that they won't make a move. And, it's not that they have to. They don't, like Cooper Kupp. It just got leaked that the Rams are seeking a 2nd round pick for him and are willing to take on some of the money. But the Chiefs aren't going to give up a top 3 pick, right? A first, second, or third round pick. They released that after the Amari Cooper news, that they're not giving up a pick like that. So I don't think Amari Cooper is going to the Chiefs either, unless they feel differently about him, particular as a player. Like they think maybe he's a tier
Cooper
above
Kupp.
these guys that were just getting traded. Cup. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see what the Chiefs end up doing, and hopefully Mahomes will be better, I guess, is the theme of what we're talking about here, because Mahomes is so bad when they have no weapons and they're just going to run the ball.
Mahomes would just walk into the owner's office and be like, "Hey, like, can you just get me Deontay Johnson, please? Like, it's not going to cost as much."
Do you think it's more likely he does that, or that he just like embraces and kind of enjoys the challenge of trying to win with Noah Gray as his number one? You know what I mean?
Think,
and then the media goes crazy about how bad he is at efficiency and stats, and it literally doesn't matter because he's
I think from a
out there throwing it
psychological perspective, it would be a little bit of both. Like, I think he definitely enjoys that, and I'm sure he'll enjoy Chris Collinsworth talking about it on Sunday Night Football. But at the end of the day, like he cares about Super Bowls, right? Like that's the biggest thing. Like he doesn't want to set the passing record or whatever. He wants to three-peat, and a guy like that is definitely going to help him. So yeah, I would err on that side for sure.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to get one of those possession guys, maybe even on the lower end, somebody that can kind of get targets or can earn targets, is Darius Slayton from the Giants, and that's a player that's out of conference, and that's on a lower end offense, so maybe they can get that done for a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick with a pick swap type of thing. So we'll see how it plays out for the Chiefs. I think we've spent enough time there. So my bust of the week here is Jayden Daniels. I know you mentioned him a couple weeks ago, and he ended up scoring 20 points. So I feel like that was a decent call, for how good he'd been. But the reason I want to set up why I think he's going to play first, because I know your first reaction was he's not going to play. I think he's going to play. So the Commanders now are 5-2, and they play the Bears, who are 4-2 coming off of their bye. If they go with Mariota and they lose this game, they're going to be 5-3, and the Bears are going to be 5-2. They're both going to be in wild card spots, and the Bears then are going to have a half a game in the loss column too, ahead of them, and they're going to have the tiebreaker on them for the playoff picture as we move forward into the season. This is like a critical game, I think, in my opinion, for how the NFC playoffs is going to shape up in the wild card. And if Daniels doesn't play and they lose this game, I think it's just going to be tough. I mean, and maybe they just end up winning so many more games than the Bears, because the Bears do have a tough division schedule, obviously. But it's not like Washington's division schedule is cake. And, they still have these games coming up against Dallas and Philadelphia. So I don't know. I think that this is going to be a pivotal game for their playoff positioning here and possibly their playoff chances. So I expect Daniels to play. But the reason I have him as a bust is because Chicago is one of the best teams against the pass. It's going to be very difficult for him to get anything going. They're not going to be giving up any sort of deep plays to McLaurin. And there hasn't been a reliable over the middle of the field receiver for this team yet. Ertz has kind of done it. Noah Brown has kind of tried to do it a little bit, but he hasn't been any sort of consistent. Luke McCaffrey has been playing out there running, but hasn't really caught very many passes. So I think it's going to be interesting that they're going to kind of shut down McLaurin on the outside, and Daniels is going to have to navigate how to win, on the short or intermediate throws. The other thing is the Bears can be had on the ground a little bit, so maybe Brian Robinson and Eckler get going a little bit. But I don't think Daniels either is going to, if he plays in this one, I don't think they're going to give him much liberty to run. I think they're going to tell him, look, you have to be very careful with how much you run in this game if you're going to go out there. And I think that caps his upside clearly, because his rushing has been what has made him such an elite fantasy quarterback so far this year. So that's my Daniels case. That's why I think he's going to play. That's why I don't think he's going to be very good for fantasy this week. And hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that tracks. If he doesn't play, you can just kind of flush this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point about why he should play. But, we all saw when he tried to throw, and then he's like, oh, like if that's still lingering and you can't throw, then obviously we can throw that out the window. And you also brought up a good point about the rushing. That was one of the things that kind of turned us off about Daniels in the offseason, was his, not just his smaller frame, but like the types of hits that he would take. His refusal to slide at LSU. And it was kind of like a miracle that he stayed healthy all season. So hopefully they kind of push him to do that more and more. But it's interesting because I was looking at the point spread on this game an hour ago, and it was -1.5 in favor of Chicago, which made me believe that Daniels was playing. And then I refreshed it, and it was -2.5. So I think the betting market is kind of thinking that he's not going to play, but maybe Vegas initially thought he was going to play. So that'll be an interesting one to kind of watch behind the scenes to see if we get a better idea. But I mean, what's his name? Mariota, like he filled in admirably, but it was against Carolina. Like he's not going to beat the Bears. Like don't pick up don't pick up Mariota and play him if you have Daniels and he's out in Superflex. Like get anyone else.
I guess if you're in a 12 team and all the quarterbacks are owned and you have to, okay, maybe.
Yeah,
but like otherwise, I agree. Don't do it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I agree with you on sliding too. I mean, how annoying. I mean, he literally had 46-yard rush. Like, why take a hit on that play? You're already past the first down. You've already racked up a ton of yards. Just you see the guy coming, just slide 5 yards early. Yeah. Okay. And just don't take that hit, right? It's fine. You're gonna get it on the next play. And it's like, I don't know. Yeah. I totally agree on not taking the hit. And instead he just gets broed and driven into the ground. And it's like, dude, what are we doing here? There's zero reason to take that hit, man. So anyways, hopefully that gets looked at on tape and he gets told after you're past the sticks, just anytime somebody gets within 5 yards, you just slide, just take
it's instincts too, man. Like that's how he plays, and he's got to learn.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He's got to learn. So like, look at it on film and make sure that that's how he's going to actually do it, because he has to understand that you have to protect yourself, and you're getting chased down by guys that are a lot bigger than you, that weigh a lot more than you. And it's not like in college anymore, necessarily, where the guys that are bigger than you aren't going to be as fast to catch you. So you're getting caught by the smaller players in the college football ranks. But even the guys that are smaller in the NFL can hit you a lot harder and drive you into the ground. They're trying to hit you hard. They're going to try to punish you if they can get their hands on you. And that's like their goal. Right. And so they're not necessarily trying to hurt you, but they do want to try and punish you for not sliding. And, if you're going to give them the opportunity, that's on you, not on them. So hopefully he learns that quickly. All right. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. We look forward to talking to you guys in the next one.
Later.